So today, I want to try something new, where I'm in front of what's being said, and then you can still read it. So today's learning target is students will be able to analyze the likelihood of an event and interpret outcomes from an experiment. All right, so let's go into this spinner. So this spinner has a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, back to 2, 3, 5, and 6. So as you can see, there's a couple questions we're being asked. What is the favorable outcome of an even number? If you remember right, a favorable outcome is what we're expecting to happen. So basically what we're looking for. Now if you look at our spinner, we look for even numbers. So we have a 2, we have a 4, we have a 2, and we have a 6. So our next question is, how many possible outcomes are there? And if you look at our spinner, you can see that our spinner is cut into 8 pieces. So therefore, we have 8 different outcomes. Even though 2 and 3 are repeated, it's still a different outcome if they hit a different tile. So our last problem asked, how many different ways can we spin and get a number less than 4? So that means that we have to find a number less than 4 on our spinner. So if you look at it, we have a 1, a 2, a 3, and then if you go around, 2 and a 3. That's 5 different options that we have to get less than 4. So therefore our answer is 5 different ways. So our next thing we need to do is review some vocab. So our vocab word is probability. Probability is a number that represents the likelihood that an event will occur. One thing we didn't talk about yesterday is the range of probability. So the range of probability, as you can see here, goes from 0 to 1. So what that means is you could have a 0% chance of doing something. 0 meaning that it's never going to happen. It's impossible. Or you could have a 100% chance of something happening, where it's happening every time and it's certain, no matter what. And then we have a couple ranges in between. Whereas if it's 25%, it's unlikely. And if it's 75%, that means it is very likely. Or we could sit here in the middle and say it's equally likely either way. Another thing we need to do is talk about relative frequency. Relative frequency is the number of times the event occurs over the total number of times you conduct the experiment. So our relative frequency tells us that on the bottom we have a 10 because we shot 10 times, but on the top we have an 8 because an 8 is how many times you made it. First, let's talk about relative frequency. Relative frequency for this problem is going to be when you shoot the basketball 10 times, but the ball only goes in 8 times. So if you look here, our relative frequency, when we divide 8 by 10, we get the answer of 0.8. Or if we look over here, we have 80%. So we have to look, is making a basket a likely option? And the answer is yes. So if you make 8 out of 10, then you have an 80% chance of that happening, which means that you're over 75%, you're over 50% likely to make that shot when you shoot. Let's look at another example of relative frequency. So this problem says, if you throw a baseball 50 times and you hit the target 15 times, what is the relative frequency? And is it likely that you're going to hit the target again? So relative frequency for this problem is going to be 15 over 50 because we threw the ball 50 times, but we only hit the target 15 times out of that 50. When you divide 15 by 50, you can then see that we get an answer of 0.3. So 0.3 is also represented as 30%. So the last part of our problem asks, is it likely that you hit the target the next time you throw a ball? The answer is no. So when you throw the ball, you're only hitting it 30% of the time, which is less than 50%, which means you're less likely to actually hit the target. You're not even hitting it half the time. If you look on your paper, you have some practice problems. This is for me to look at your paper and determine whether you're getting it, or maybe you need a little bit of extra help, or you have some questions. But feel free to ask any questions during this time, and I'll come around and help you. After you've completed your problems, I want you to raise your hand, and I'll come over and check them. Once I've checked your problems, I'll hand you a spinner. That spinner should be flicked 50 times. There's 2 spinners, so that means you'll be flicking each spinner 50 times for a total of 100 times. We're going to calculate probability and see what the class gets as a whole. Once you're done with that, I'll give you your next instruction.